He fought for his country, risked his life in war zones, and wore the uniform with pride. But the moment he got pulled over by police, none of that mattered. In seconds, bullets were flying, and the real fight began. Not on the battlefield, but on American streets. Marcus Brown, a 32-year-old Black Army veteran, had just left his mother's house after a warm Sunday dinner. He was calm, listening to soft jazz on the radio as he drove through his quiet neighborhood. The sun was setting, and the sky was painted with gold and orange. Life felt peaceful, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Marcus had served 2 tours overseas, survived the battlefield, and returned home with honor. Now, he was rebuilding his life, working a steady job, caring for his mom, and staying out of trouble. But as he turned onto a familiar road, flashing red and blue lights lit up behind him. A police cruiser signaled for him to pull over. Confused, but cooperative, Marcus slowed down and parked along the curb. He kept both hands on the wheel, just like he had been taught during military and firearm safety training. He knew how these situations could go wrong, especially for black men, and he wasn't about to take any chances. He rolled his window halfway down and waited patiently. The officers approached quickly. One of them looked nervous, his hand already resting on his gun. Marcus greeted them politely. "Good evening, officers." But before he could reach for his license and registration, one of the cops shouted, "Don't move." Another yelled, "Step out of the vehicle." The orders were fast, loud, and confusing. Marcus tried to speak but was cut off. His heart began to race. Why were they so aggressive? What had he done? He remained still, breathing slowly, trying to stay calm. But then, a loud bang. The sound of a gunshot cracked through the quiet. Evening, the bullet hit his side mirror. Marcus dropped down instantly, his military instincts kicking in. Everything had changed in one terrifying second. Hit the floor of his car, his ears ringing from the gunshot. His training in combat zones overseas taught him one thing: stay low, stay alert, and survive. But this wasn't Iraq or Afghanistan. This was home, and the people shooting at him weren't enemies, they were local police. His mind raced, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He hadn't made any sudden moves, he hadn't even reached for anything. Yet someone pulled the trigger. As he lay curled near the driver's side, broken glass scattered across his lap, Marcus quickly assessed himself. No blood. He hadn't been hit yet. He could hear the officers yelling, their words unclear, almost panicked. One shouted, "He's got a gun?" Marcus did. Lagoya's small, registered handgun locked in his glove compartment. He never intended to use it. It was for protection, just in case. But now, it might be the only thing that kept him alive. He shouted back, "I'm a veteran. I'm armed legally. Don't shoot." But it was like they didn't hear him or didn't care. Another shot fired, this one closer. That was it. Marcus knew he couldn't stay still. If they were going to keep firing, he had no choice but to defend himself. He reached into the glove box, slowly, carefully, just like he'd practiced 100 times. He kept low, cracked his door open for cover, and held his weapon tightly but not to attack. His goal was to survive, to make it out of this nightmare, alive. He didn't fire back yet, not until he saw another muzzle flash aimed at him. Then, with a steady hand and the discipline of a soldier, Marcus fired just once. A warning, a response. He didn't want war, but it had found him anyway. Right here on the streets he once called safe, Marcus crouched behind the open door of his car, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air. His mind raced through every scenario he had been trained for, but none of them looked like this being shot at by police in his own neighborhood. He hadn't hurt anyone, hadn't broken any law, yet they were treating him like a threat. He could hear more sirens now, more tires screeching as backup arrived. He knew how this could end to many black men. Didn't live to tell their side of the story. Marcus gripped his handgun tightly, not out of rage, but out of fear. He wasn't aiming to kill. Every time he returned fire, he aimed low toward the ground just to get them to stop shooting. "I'm not your enemy," he shouted, hoping anyone would listen. The yelling on the police side began to change. He heard one officer, "Call out!" he's shooting back. Another shouted for cover. The chaos started to settle as the officers finally pulled back behind their cars. For a moment, the gunfire stopped. Marcus took that chance to put his weapon down, slowly placing it on the ground, raising both hands into the air. He didn't want to die, he just wanted to live. His voice cracked as he yelled, "I'm coming out. Don't shoot. I'm not a threat." There was silence, then more shouting, but it was different. Now more cautious. Maybe someone finally realized who he was. He stayed on his knees, hands above his head, heart pounding in his chest. In that moment, Marcus wasn't a soldier, a suspect, or a hero. He was just a man trying to survive in a country he'd once risked his life to protect. And now, the world was about to see how that country treated him in return. As Marcus knelt on the pavement, hands still in the air, several officers moved in cautiously with weapons drawn. A commanding voice shouted, "Don't move." Even though Marcus hadn't twitched, he stayed still, his heart racing, praying they wouldn't mistake his silence for defiance. He felt a knee press into his back as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't resist, he didn't even speak. He just stared at the ground, trying to stay calm. A few moments later, a senior officer arrived, older, more composed. He ordered the others to stand down and pulled Marcus aside. "Who are you?" he asked. "Marcus Brown, U.S. Army veteran. I have a license for my firearm. I was just driving home." The officer's face changed. He looked down at the ID Marcus provided, then at the squad cars, and then back at Marcus. Something wasn't right, and he knew it. Bodycam footage was reviewed on the scene. It showed exactly what Marcus said. He had his hands on the wheel, was calm, and never reached for anything before the first shot was fired. There was no threateningly fear and poor judgment. Within the hour, Marcus was uncuffed and released. The officers involved were pulled aside and taken off duty pending investigation. News spread fast. A crowd began to gather, people filming, asking questions. How could someone like Marcus, decorated, disciplined, and peaceful, be treated like a criminal without cause? The answer was painfully clear. It wasn't about what Marcus did. It was about what he looked like. That night, local news aired the story, showing the footage, the panic, and the truth. The world started watching, and public pressure grew. Marcus didn't go home in silence. This time, he had a voice, and now, millions were finally ready to listen. Asterisk, in the days following the incident, Marcus Brown's story spread far beyond his neighborhood. News outlets picked it up nationwide, sharing the bodycam footage, community interviews, and Marcus's calm but emotional statement, "I fought for this country. I didn't expect to have to fight to stay alive in it." His words hit hard. People marched in support of him, demanding accountability. Not just for the officers who fired without reason, but for the system that allowed it. Marcus was invited to speak at city council meetings, rallies, and veteran events. He never spoke with anger only, with clarity, calling for better police training, racial bias, education, and laws that protected citizens and officers equally. He met with lawmakers, used his experience to push for change, and refused to let what happened to him be forgotten. But more than anything, he became a symbol of survival, strength, and truth. Many black veterans across the country came forward, with their own painful stories, saying they finally felt seen. Marcus never imagined his quiet drive home would turn into a national conversation. But if it had to happen to him, he decided it wouldn't be wasted. He turned trauma into purpose. He turned fear into courage. And instead of staying silent, he made sure others wouldn't have to scream just to be heard. Standing at a podium, 1 year later, he looked out at a crowd filled with families, officers, students, and veterans. "We all want the same thing," he said. "Respect, safety, a chance to live." The audience rose to their feet, not just in applause, but in hope. Marcus Brown didn't just survive that night, he changed the story. And because of that, the country began to write a new one. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Asterisk, subscribe to Deep Wounds for more powerful real-life stories that need to be heard.